Give her another minute. I want to get this started right at one to be respectful of everyone's time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Piper. I'm the administrator of the Division of Industry Services. Thank you all for joining us for our summer EIS quarterly call. As always, we hope you find value in these calls. I know we cover quite a wide range of topics that may not apply to all of you, but divisions involved in a wide array of disciplines, and we do our best to present topics that are inclusive of as many disciplines as possible. As always, if you miss a portion of this call, it'll be available in a full recording made available on our website, and a link will be included in our quarterly newsletter, which will come out Friday. I think I've spoken enough. Let me turn this over to our first presenters, Kim Schmidt and Dave Reason, who will be discussing mine safety programs and fees. Kim, are you there? Dave, are you there?
Dave's here. Can you
All
hear
right.
me?
Yep.
Okay. My name's Dave Reason. I'm the department's mine safety inspector, and was asked to cover a couple different things regarding the mine safety program. For an opening, next slide, please. A little something done by hobbyists here in Wisconsin. Are we getting sound out of that, Etta? Okay, is anybody hearing that?
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, we are not.
All right. That was just an example of some of the quality done by pyrotechnics hobbyists here in Wisconsin. I figured kind of like a baseball game. We start off with the national anthem, so it was all tied in. We can go to the next slide. I think that gremlin we were fighting yesterday, Etta, kind of jumped up. Okay, this is an example of what most of the time we run into out there. Just a pattern out there on a mine site. Those mounds in the front are drill cuttings. And we got some movement out of the leaves. We should be hearing fire in the hole right about now. And come on. It's kind of like what we want to see out there, nice and uneventful. And that probably put 20,000 ton of rock on the ground to break up for road base, for asphalt, you name it. Kind of old school because it was about 7 years ago, and that was a handheld camera taking that picture. Slide, please. And this is new. This was taken at 320 feet up in the sky, 320 holes, end of November last year. And when you've got this type of a record, it's a whole lot easier to address questions that might come up about blasting. This was by the book. Tends to make my life a whole lot easier. Slide, please. So, mine safety isn't just blasting and fireworks. It's not just making the sky light up at night. Technology, especially from that first production shot to the second one, has impacted the program a lot. And it's made things a lot easier, a lot faster. And for the most part, it's a whole lot quicker. Slide, please. What we used to do was get these cards mailed in by every mining company in the state, telling us when they were going to be opening up, what quarry, where they were going to be, what date, when they're going to be closing, expected tonnage. And once one of our program assistants would log this information into the system, typically a spreadsheet, then you have to turn around and come back and mail them all paper at the end of the year. Slide, please. Now, this is what your form looks like that comes out of Vessela. It shows you written nice and neatly where the quarry is, who put the paperwork in, when they're going to start, expected tonnage that they're going to be producing. Great. It's a great help, especially being able to search this faster. Somebody calls up and complains about a quarry in the neighborhood, find out their address, say, yep, this is so-and-so's quarry or such and such. Or in several occasions, well, you've got 2, 3, 4 different quarries within half a mile of your house. We need to find out which one is causing you concern. Having this searchable is a whole lot easier. Slide, please. Each customer can come into ISLA, keep track of their annual notices to begin operations. Here's a screenshot from Johnson Sand and Gravel over in New Berlin. Comes in. They can sort them by dates when they expire, then go back into them and update them. That little options button on the right-hand side, select that, and it comes up, takes them straight to Safety Service Fee Production. All they have to do is grab that. They can tell us what they did and speeds up the process. No paper needed. Slide, please. So first of all, they give us the details. In this case, okay, it's over in Door County. Penny puts in her address, her name, and her goes to save and continue. Next slide. Tells us how much they produced at this individual quarry. Each one has a different dollar amount associated with it. The minimum is $70 safety service fee for up to, but not surpassing 50,000 ton. Next slide. And here they have to add their attachment for the MSHA 7000-2 form, which tells them how many hours they worked. They'll also have to report how many short tons of coal they produced, but since Wisconsin doesn't have any coal reserves, that's always blank. But this is where that form gets uploaded. Slide, please. Like anything else where they're gonna upload a form on online, click on Add Document. It pulls up whatever directory you want. You grab your form, add attachment, and you click on Save and Continue at the bottom. Slide, please. Okay, put in your attest to the end of it. I accept. In this case, I did a screenshot just a little bit faster than Penny typed in her complete name, and away you go. There are no little red dots on any of the chevrons, so everything was good. In this case, Penny did 2 quarries they've got, and she entered the tonnage for both of them. So now she can either select one quarry or she can select both to pay the fees for. So in this case, Penny selected both or all on the yellow line up there. Slide, please. And then this e-payment page will come up. This is a little bit of an eye test, so slide, please. Top tells them how much they're going to have to pay. Tells you that it's a one-time payment. They're going to pay it now. Next slide. Verifies your information. Company name you can put in there if you want to. Second address if you want. Say it's P.O. Box is your second address. Validate your phone number and email address of who's paying it for you. Because sometimes these things are paid by the crushing company that does it. Okay, next slide. This is the part that most companies like. They can pay it with a check as opposed to a credit card. Checks don't have fees associated paying it online. Credit cards do. So they can pay it out of savings if they want. I've yet to have anybody do that. Most of the time, though, you pay your safety service fee out of a company check, and you annotate on here that it's a business account. And away you go. Next page. This is what your individual safety service fee summary looks like. This will tell you what company it is, and it'll also tell you, the location and the name of the site. So in this case, it's Camp Myers Quarry over in McFarland, and it's Wingras. So they can use this as a receipt. Man, I misspelled receipt up there on that slide. Sorry about that, folks. And then they can print this off individually for each of their locations. Slide, please. And this is what we get to look at in ESL. It'll tell you, safety service fee payment number was PY-62-1685. It'll tell you the service request number. This page won't show you, though, what company we're dealing with. So it gets to be a little bit interesting. The overall payment, though, was $1,260, but for this particular safety service fee payment, it was just $70. So this is one of our larger operators out there that's got multiple quarries. You can have an individual payment of $560 all the way up to $1,100 just for one site. Slide, please. And these are some issues that customers have brought up to me. Happens a few times. Once safety service fee gets paid, there's not a mechanism that keeps it from getting paid a second time. So we've had to do a few refunds. The one person wants to make some points for themselves and they pay the fee in January, and then the boss comes back from vacation in March And they decide they're gonna pay the fees, and the next thing you know, we got twice as much money as we should. What I'm being told out there by the mining companies is when they treat each mine as its own cost center, they want to keep track of all the expenses and fees and everything else. So much diesel to this quarry, so much electricity to this quarry, so much landscaping, cutting the grass and plowing the snow, so on and so forth. The individual site that you saw, the individual record, if you're paying one at a time, you can get that. It's request was made if we can maybe make that happen regardless. And it's like, okay, well, we'll take a look at it. One of the issues that we've had is old emails in Isla. We've got some of the records that came in. The emails were no longer valid. People had moved on. And up until recently, we couldn't have like office at XYZ Mining associated with more than one person. That's been addressed, but it's still a bit of a pain when people leave and then the emails don't get responded to because somebody's gone. So there's times when it's like, okay, well, this permit hasn't been closed out, safety service fee hasn't been generated. It's back on the phone to try and get a hold of people. So trying to figure out a better way to make that happen. But by and large, once people get logged into the program and understand Isla, helps a lot. I just talking with a gentleman this morning. He's got a construction company. He also has a soil tester license. So it wasn't ground zero starting the gentleman off getting his safety service fee and his annual notice to commence operations taken care of since he's starting a new quarry. But going through some of the steps, it's good to be able to get people on a Microsoft Teams and help them navigate the steps, because some of the steps, some of these folks are just not really getting. So I do spend a good bit of time walking some of these folks through the process. But by and large, once they get through it once or twice, it goes a lot faster. And it helps that MSHA's notice to commence operations is already online as well. So it's different than what we've got, but it's helping people get used to the idea of going paperless. So any questions out there about the billing, about the permit? If you don't have any questions now, you can sing out later. And in conclusion, slide please. Let's be careful out there. Okay, Etta, that's all I got for you.
Dave. Next up with POUTS program updates, we have Josh Rowley. Josh, you there?
Yes, Sam, I thought Matt was presenting today. So let's go to the next slide, please. So our group recently took over product approvals in 2023, and it's given us a better handle on correlating our product approvals with what we're seeing in the field, any issues. This includes new and renewal products such as tanks, treatment devices, and component manuals. Internal review benefits the industry by specialized product knowledge, uniform requirements, and standardization across our product categories and manufacturers. Next slide, please. So the wastewater pretreatment devices, product approvals varied in conditions and capabilities even within a manufacturer. Some units receive vertical separation credits but required tertiary treatments. Some NSF approved units were not being sold and installed as tested by NSF. And then the department had reached out to manufacturers for resolutions of discrepancies. and their product approvals. The department is in its final stages of getting the revised approvals drafted. Any product approval changes will be relayed to the public and communicated to the industry. Next slide, please. This is the hydrograph area. Etta, if you could unmute Matt Jansen, he would be better versed in this, especially if there's going to be any questions.
We don't take questions, but if you give me just a second, I will unmute him.
I can just keep going with this to save time here. So that hydrograph procedures under 385-60 parents 4, when regional water table fluctuations are considered in deep sandy soils, the predicted high groundwater elevation shall be established using the hydrograph documentation. There was a large recharge event, so it caused everybody to look at this process again. So observed water at proposed sites as compared to USGS or other wells with known historical data. Extrapolation is made to predict high groundwater elevations at proposed sites. Next slide, please.
I could jump in here, Josh.
All right, sounds good.
We'll take the next slide. So the hydrograph method, this is just a highlight of Adams County in here. In June of 2022, DSPS did some field research. We went out into the field and we looked at those, especially those that are highlighted in red. Those are ones that we saw did not meet their separation distance based on use of the hydrograph. System elevation is verified out in the field and the groundwater elevation at that time out in the field on June 2020. This map shows you the Wisconsin Geological Natural History Survey. That's what WGNHS stands for. Their well data. This is just the depth of well at the time of installation, so it's not based on seasonal or peak. It just sort of shows you generally where shallower wells are. The darker the color, the shallower the well. As you can see that there's sort of a little finger that goes in there that's a little bit shallower, plus that's where our red sites happen to match up with. Now, granted, we did not do all of Adams County. We did just those couple townships in that area where the red appears. So the questions that we have with the hydrograph method is which wells do we use? The code basically says just use the hydrograph method, but it doesn't spell out exactly what that is. So which wells should be used? Closer ones, farther ones away, which ones respond geographically? What are the correction factors? Again, none of that is wrote in the code. It's just sort of been, whatever the county says, they're the ones that would actually do this procedure or approve the procedure. Restriction on non-uniform soils. There's no restrictions in there for like perching water tables, things like that, other inclusions. So again, this relates to sort of the counties have done the approvals. Nothing is wrote down at the county level or in the code, and it's more of an oral tradition of how things have been done. However, as county staff have turned over, we've seen more and more issues where sites are extrapolated very far away across major watersheds. Correction factors have been called into correction. The non-uniform soils haven't been looked at. But what prompted this was we had some groundwater flooding. We actually had the water table came up above the ground surface. And that's why we looked at that area where the red dots are, is that there was prolonged water above grade there for approximately 18 months. Now we know there are some other areas in some other counties where we also had groundwater flooding, but again, based on resources and time for staff, we weren't able to evaluate all of them, but we know that there are areas that don't respond, and then this whole list of issues. Next slide. So SPS 385.60 parent 4 parent F does allow the governmental unit or the department to suspend use of the hydrograph procedure when erratic groundwater tables are present due to significant recharge events. So we did do that as of April 1st.
the department did suspend the hydrograph procedure. Twofold. One, because we did have groundwater flooding in areas and we don't know why or where exactly all the problem areas relate to the hydrograph method. So as part of that, we're sort of doing a reset and we're reevaluating the whole hydrograph method. So this was proposed to the technical advisory committee, or we announced it to them before we did our suspension and they agreed with it. We also have another technical advisory committee coming up in July. And we have a proposal from the Geological and Natural History Survey over the next 12 months. It's actually an expenditure of time and resources to go out in the field, evaluate where these wells are, where they respond, where they don't respond, and over the next 12 months come up with basically based on their research, what we can do with the hydrograph method. So we do have an avenue that we are moving forward. For those that are concerned that we've restricted or eliminated the hydrograph method at this time, we can still use the standard soil test. We still have an interpretive report, which is sort of an open-ended report that can bring in any kind of information to justify use of the site. So we still have methods to work forward. So this isn't, we're suspending building or septic systems in the central part of the state. We still have avenues to work forward in time. Next slide. So before I go, just one other thing, I did not have a slide for it, but we do have a meeting coming up this Friday with the DNR for the memorandum of understanding between the two agencies on large scale systems and in industrial commingled wastewater. So hopefully we'll have some information available for that to bring also to the TAC in July and move that forward. I know that's something that some people have been asking about. So I didn't have time to get that in the slide. Recent I guess activity on that, but just sort of wanted to plug that out there, let you know that that is also moving forward. Otherwise, that's all we have for the POUT section.
Thank you, Matt. Joshua. Next up with fire prevention, 2% dues season summary, Sarah Brown. Sarah, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Brandon. So my name is Sarah Brown. I am the Operations Program Associate and the ENFRS Program Manager with the Fire Prevention, Safety, and Health Program. Next slide. And we just completed our 2% fire dues process for the year. We do self-certification during this time of all the fire chiefs and the municipality clerks. And then we also have our fire coordinators go out and do audits of the fire departments. And this year, a total of 232 audits were conducted. We had 195 of those audits were compliant, which is great. And then we did have, sadly, 37 that were non-compliant. You can see the breakdown here per district. We try to get right around the same amount of audits per district. Some guys get a little bit more, some get a little bit less, but it all evens out over the course of the years. Typically, they try to do a audit like every 3 years of a department. They try to get them on that cycle, but when we have an audit fail, they go back the following year to make sure that that fire department is back in compliance or they are failed again for the following year. Next slide. And then our fire due self-certification stats for this year, we have a total of 799 fire chiefs that completed the self-certification, or we have a total of 799 fire chiefs in Wisconsin, and we have 1,845 clerks in Wisconsin that are to be completing this. We did have 5 chiefs that didn't complete the certification. We had 4 that self-certified that they were in a failing status when they self-certify, they can answer yes or no to the questions. And if they answer no, that they are not compliant with that rule, then they would say no, and then that automatically triggers an audit for that fire department. Now we had 12 clerks this year that didn't complete the certification, and then we had 3 clerks that self-certified that their fire department was failing to meet some of the requirements of SPS 314. That also will trigger an audit, and the fire coordinator in that district will go out and do an audit on the fire department to find out what's going on, provide some education, pointers on what to do to become compliant again, things like that. Then just a little payment summary. This year we had, of the 1,845 municipalities, 1,819 are eligible for a 2% payment this year. 26 sadly were not eligible for a payment this year. And the reasons for that a lot had to do with them not getting their fire inspections completed for the year. And next slide, please. Okay, fire prevention, upcoming events and updates that we have this year. Last weekend, we had the Wisconsin Fire Chiefs Association annual conference and trade show, and Steve Kamar and Aaron Andre, they went down to and had a booth, answered a lot of chief questions on Friday, had lots of good networking going on there. Then starting in August and running through November, we will be providing our annual fall training to the Wisconsin Fire Service. These training sessions are held either in person, well, you can go either in person or you can go online. We do both. So this year we're trying to partner up with the tech colleges where possible, so that we have all the technology that we need to give a good presentation, and that it kind of opens it up to a bigger crowd. This year's topics are elevators in the fire code, website navigation, the DSPS fire prevention website, our Craig 1300. We are going to be giving a NERS update, and there will also be a training on the SPS 314, the inspection programs, and SPS 330 training programs, how the fire departments can be doing monthly, what kind of monthly and annual trainings they should be providing. Now, on October 7th, myself and Aaron Andre will be going to the Wisconsin Towns Association annual convention for the first time, and we are going to be providing a self-certification training program for the clerks. We've been noticing over the years that we have a big turnover with clerks in the state, and a lot of times the incoming clerk isn't trained by the outgoing clerk, and she or he doesn't know that the fire due self-certification even exists. So we're hoping that by providing this training to the clerks, that they will have more of a jump on when self-certification opens in January. Mostly the chiefs already know about this, but we do a little plug during our fall training to the fire chiefs. Don't forget to, make sure your username and password is working for Isla and things like that. October 23rd through the 25th, we have another fall conference with the fire inspectors. This we do annually. We have an educational booth, and this year again we are going to be doing a speaking engagement for them, and we will be pretty much sticking to our topics for the fall training. We'll just be maybe making them a little bit smaller because our window of the speaking engagement isn't as long as what we have for our fall trainings. So there'll probably just be a little bit of a shortened version of what our topics are. We have an exciting update. Fire Prevention Coordinator Gary Peck has recently been appointed to the National Community Risk Reduction Vision 2020 Champions in Emerging Leaders Group. This is a 2-year appointment. The CRR champions and the CL group participate directly in the National Community Risk Reduction strategic planning to achieve measurable outcomes in CRR at the local, state, and national levels. And I just, for one, want to congratulate Gary on that appointment, and I know you're going to do great at it. Next slide. And I want to just thank you for listening, and you all have a great day.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up, to speak about amusement ride registration, we have Lucas Dedrick and Andrew Amacher. Andrew, you there?
Thank you, Brandon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to give a brief overview for amusement rides as it pertains to inflatables. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to cover some of the registration requirements, department inspections, the inspection and operational tests, record keeping, operation and training requirements, accident reporting, a brief FAQ as it relates to inflatables, and then provide some contact information for our group. Next slide, please. So registration and renewal of amusement rides. So in order to register a device, it's registered in our DSPS's Isla website, and each device is required to be registered annually. The registration fee is $55 and is valid for the calendar year and expires on December 31st, regardless of when the registration was created. As I said, I'll be covering specifically to inflatables, and inflatables in most situations are classified as a Class 1 amusement ride. As part of the registration requirement, we do require proof of insurance that covers at least $1 million per occurrence and liability. And we, the department, also needs to be listed as the certificate holder. In order for a registration to be valid, all prior fees must have been paid. So that could be inspection fees or other fees that were outstanding from years prior. Any open orders that were issued need to be corrected. And then we require itineraries to be submitted for the operating year. Next slide, please. Department inspections. So every amusement ride is subject to a periodic inspection conducted by the department or its authorized representative. At this time, the department is who does the inspections, a representative from DSPS. And the cost for those inspections for Class 1, as I stated, most inflatables are Class 1 amusement rides, are $140. And then if there is an order or issued and it's not complied with, there can be $100 per device non-compliance fee assessed with that. Next slide, please. Itinerary requirements. This has been a topic of discussion amongst inflatable operators. So all operators need to submit itineraries to the department. The itinerary provides us with the event dates, the location of the event, the type of the event that's taking place, whether it's a yearly rental for an operator, or if it's a in a public event like a fair, community festival, and then the county that the or city that the event is taking place, and the number of devices that will be there. There's three primary differences in itineraries. First is public events. So these, from the department's view, are any fairs, community festivals, or public parks where the device may be set up in the public. The next is rental operators, and this would be for somebody who is renting out the inflatables to members of the public. For this type of itinerary, we just need to know what the company is, how many devices the company is renting out for the operating year. And then we have many people, and becoming more popular, of hybrid operators that both rent to the public and provide inflatables for public events such as fairs or community festivals. In those situations, an itinerary needs to be made for the year for the rental company, and then each of the individual locations where they're being set up in the public needs to be identified on an itinerary. Next slide, please. Inspections and operational tests. Our current adopted code requires inspection at assembly and a daily inspection and operational tests if the device is being set up for multiple days. These need to be completed and documented by the owner each time that they're completed. Next slide, please. Record keeping. All of the records and documentation that's provided with the amusement ride is subject to inspection by the department. So as stated, these records would include the daily inspections, the operational tests, and the records shall be kept with the device for the 30 previous days of operation. So when you're doing a public event, have those documents for the 30 previous days of operation, and all records need to be kept for 7 years. However, the 7 years of records do not need to be kept with the device. Next slide, please. Operation and training. This has been a topic that's been asked about for operation of an amusement ride. Current code states that an amusement ride shall be operated by an authorized person at least 18 years of age. There are some exemptions for it that may or may not fall under different setup scenarios for inflatable operators, but do know that the code does require an authorized person of at least 18 years of age to operate the ride. And the owner is required to provide training for the operators and document that training to show proof that the person or individual that is in charge of that device has been trained. One thing that we've seen going forward is for rental operators, because you may be delivering and setting up and having an individual, or it may go into a backyard. Are you providing that training or information to those customers so that they're aware of how the device needs to be operated, if there's a wind speed requirement, or if it's been properly staked? So that's just something as a rental operator to think about, to make sure that you provide that information to those customers that are renting the device from you. Next slide, please. Accident reporting. There's been numerous accidents reported with inflatables. I'm going to show in the next few slides after this a couple samples of news articles that have happened, and it seems to be that inflatables are becoming more and more taken to the air during storms because of improper staking or lack of staking. If you do operate an inflatable in the state and there is an accident that goes up beyond basic first aid treatment, the department needs to be notified within 2 business days of the injury. And if there's a fatality, it needs to be reported within 24 hours. We have several ways you can report those to us. They can be submitted from the website under the permit. They can be emailed or contact your area's safety inspector directly to report that. We have a group tech box that they can be submitted to, and they can also be called into the department at the phone number listed on the screen here. Next slide, please. So as I stated, these are some screenshots of news articles. All three that I'm going to show today are from this current year. As I said, inflatables have been in the news more and more recently with accidents that have included the loss of life in this situation, a 2-year-old boy. Next slide, please. Sometimes they don't require or cause an injury or a death to an individual, but they can take off like a sail in this situation. The news article is talking about an individual who had an inflatable in their backyard, and a dust devil took it 100 feet in the air. Next slide, please. And as I stated, there was some more scrutiny on inflatables. This article is talking about a study on wind-related bounce house accidents that have documented at least 132 cases, caused 479 injuries in adults and juveniles, and at least 28 deaths. Next slide, please. This is a sample of an informational sheet that's provided by a bounce house manufacturer. So in here, they give the specifics of what needs to be done in order to secure the device properly, including the power requirements, not operating in winds higher than 20 miles an hour. And this is a very critical piece of an inflatable, and making sure that the requirements from the manufacturer are followed. Next slide, please. And talking of the paper or the inspection requirements and daily operations, this also is from the same manufacturer, and the manufacturer has provided a daily inspection checklist of what needs to be completed to ensure that the device is safe for operation. It could be checking stakes, zippers, the blowers, but there isn't anything loose on the device that could cause somebody to get caught on. And gives requirements for, again, the wind and not operating in excess of 20 miles an hour, and then giving requirements of the guests that'll be using it for height and weight restrictions, if there is any. Next slide, please. As I stated, we've had quite a few contacts from individuals on inflatables. So these questions here briefly just cover some of the common questions that are asked from us by the department. The registration, as I stated, is completed through the EASA website. The big one, if inflatables are only rented out to individuals, they need to be registered. Yes, all inflatables must be registered yearly, regardless of whether they're being rented out to somebody in their backyard or they're going into public events, as I said, fairs, parks, public operational usage. Does someone have to staff the inflatable? Yes. Our current adopted code states that each amusement ride shall be operated by an authorized person. And another one, as we see more and more inflatables, and many of them coming from overseas that are not being provided with manuals or checklists. That's been a concern that is more prevalent now, as I stated, with overseas manufacturers that are not providing information. In that situation, we use recognized safe practice and guidance for the operation and maintenance of the device, and can help guide in what other or provide samples from other manufacturers of what recognized safe practice is. Next slide, please. To get more information on our program, we do have a web page on the DSPS website under programs for amusement rides. And on here, the two big items that I'll point out on the right-hand side under the additional resources column, you can obtain a full copy of the current code by that first link that's listed there, administrative rules and statuses. And then the second one is the bottom link in their inspection district map. And I'm actually going to show a copy of that on the next slide, but you can retrieve that map to find out who the inspector is in your area from this website as well. Next slide, please. And as I stated, the district map, and this is the contact information. If you do have questions, I would suggest reaching out to your local inspector. There are 6 of us throughout the state in different regions, and call, email if you have a question on if something needs to be registered or how to register a device, or if you have just general information or questions about the amusement ride program. We do have a general email box that's checked daily by a member of our group and can get questions back or answered back to you fairly quickly through that DSPS Health and Safety Tech at wisconsin.gov email address. And that is all I have. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Next up, we have Eric Hansen, who'll be discussing salt sheds.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Hansen. I'm with DSPS and a plan reviewer in the Hayward office. We're going to talk a little bit about salt storage sheds. First and foremost, determining which occupants you are, S or U. We're going to look into a little bit of the requirements for ventilation, and then we're going to briefly touch on membrane buildings, which are showing up as more predominantly for salt storage facilities. Next slide, please. So the first thing we got to look at is, are we an S or U? An S occupancy, storage occupancy, is either an S1 or an S2, depending on the level of hazard, the things you're storing there, and whether or not there's motor vehicles presence. Typically a salt storage building, because salt is non-flammable, non-combustible, it can actually extinguish a small fire. So there's no dealing with any hazardous occupancy levels here. It all has to do with the use and how it's going to be loaded, primarily with either with a large front end loader or possibly a Bobcat sized unit, and whether or not the vehicle that's being loaded is going to be in the building. So by definition, you're either looking at, if it's an S occupancy, you're either looking at an enclosed parking garage or an open parking garage. Most salt storage buildings, because of the sidewall requirement to contain the salt, is going to be an enclosed parking garage, even though one end of it is typically open. The definition of a motorized vehicle is provided to establish what exactly we're talking about, and distinguishing it from a commercial motor vehicle, which is another avenue. So motorized vehicle is typically a motor-driven vehicle used for moving people or products. So the or products part is the trigger. On the other hand, a U occupancy is going to be a storage shed, is the description, but use of the word shed, because salt storage sheds are typically how they're described, is a little misleading. U occupancies are typically unoccupied buildings or minimally occupied, so, or periodically occupied. So there's not a regular basis for people being in the building to move product in and out. It's going to happen, seasonally or just not very often. So the S1 or S2 depends on the contents, and the U determination has to do with the occupancy. Next slide, please. The trigger between S1, S2 versus U is primarily ventilation. If you are parking vehicles in this building, then you need to have ventilation. So the parking, the determination of whether or not a vehicle is parked there basically means, are you storing the vehicle in the building? If it's just going in and out for the purposes of loading and unloading salt, then we're probably talking more about a U occupancy because there is no motor vehicle presence there for long periods of time. If you're going to operate the motor vehicle in the building, the front end loader or what have you, for longer periods, then you have to look at the ventilation requirement. That's handled a couple different ways. A mechanical ventilation system is the primary method of doing this. And it involves sensors and minimum levels of ventilation, either continuous or intermittently. The first method is for an enclosed parking garage. You're permitted to use a combination of intermittent and constant by starting with a continuously vented rate at 0.05 CFM per square foot as a basis or minimum. And then in addition to that, a system or the ability for the system to react to a combination of occupancy sensors and carbon monoxide and nitrogen dioxide sensors, depending on whether diesel is present, to determine this second level of minimum ventilation at 0.75 CFM per square foot. And in addition to that, the requirements in 3640404 parentheses 2 and 3, which we'll get to in a second. The other method is by intermittently and for a time period. So it would be on a time clock and a minimum of at least 5 hours in each 24-hour period at the 0.75 CFM per square foot rate. And then also including the use of carbon monoxide and nitrogen dioxide sensors as appropriate for the use, meaning diesel vehicles present or not. And that also is required to address the requirements in 3640404 parentheses 2 and 3. And both of those are directed at automatically operating upon the detection of carbon monoxide at a level of 35 parts per million by an automatic trigger, or if diesel is present, the detection of nitrogen dioxide at a level of 1 part per million, and again automatically detected. And the other component of that secondary system is that it shall maintain a negative or neutral pressure in the garage area relative to other spaces that might be adjacent to it. Next slide, please. There are exceptions. First and foremost, determining if you are a parking garage, if you're enclosed, or if you're open. Generally speaking, if you're talking about a garage, you're talking about a closed parking space. If you're talking about a ramp, you would be talking about an open garage or an open storage space or parking space. So in an enclosed parking space, which most salt storage buildings would be enclosed, even if they're open on one side, they're considered enclosed. Would need to be ventilated, but there's exceptions if you have a very small building, 850 square feet or less, or if it's used for storage of 5 or fewer motorized vehicles. Now, this is not a commercial motorized vehicle. This is a motorized vehicle. So a Bobcat, a small end loader, something of that nature. You'd be allowed to have 5 or less of those in that building and not trigger the ventilation requirement. Or you can utilize the provisions in IMC 402 and SPS 364.0402 for natural ventilation. The requirement for natural ventilation is 4% of the floor area. And the biggest hurdle we run into with this concept is that while the code does not specifically state it, the commentary alludes to it in saying that we're really talking about cross ventilation. So the typical salt storage building, which is completely enclosed on 3 sides and open on one end, is not cross ventilated. That does not actively ventilate the space. You would have to have some method or openings or grills of some type that would allow for ventilation to flow through the building. Next slide, please. Membrane structures, just briefly touch on these. The use of these large usually metal structured and fabric skinned buildings, because of their ability to have high volumes of spaces, are being used a lot for storage of things like grains and salt. And are specifically used for this because of the ability for them to go up fast and easily. They lend themselves quite well to salt storage. They're usually going to be a 2B building, but they can also be a type 4 or 5. The trigger is the membrane. The membrane needs to be either non-combustible or has to meet the testing methods 1 or 2 of NFPA 701, which describes some specific tests that the the product has to meet in order to comply. The other type of membrane building that you hear about is air supported, but you're probably never going to see that for a salt storage building because typically one end has to be open. Even if it's enclosed and has an overhead door, that's going to be open for quite a while you're loading and unloading. So it wouldn't lend itself well to that. And salt, because of its corrosive nature, you don't see a lot of metal buildings either doing this type of thing. Also, one other thing to mention for the overall topic of salt storage is that in 1006, the requirement for exiting the building, the common path of egress, which you would typically have to have in a building, two means of egress, because the salt is typically piled up against the outside walls. There is no passage, so to speak. So the requirement for a common path of egress is allowed to be 250 feet, which then gets you out of the requirement of having the second exit and the fact that your entire floor area is probably covered with salt. So to quickly summarize that, you have to establish your salt storage facility. You're going to look at the determine if you're an S or U. That has to do with, again, with the motor vehicle present or not. Remember that the ventilation requirement is there if the motor vehicle is a requirement or is going to be present, and then understand that there are special requirements for membrane buildings if you choose to go that direction. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Again, thank all of you for attending. So if you missed any part of this and you'd like to hear it, feel free to check our website or check our newsletter, which should be coming out tomorrow. Thank you all for attending.